Good morning, y'all. Today, I'm going to be talking about prompting, best practices in prompting, and how to think about prompting. So the first things first, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen and take you through kind of the mind of how to prompt. And the first thing that I want to share is just the fact that what we're doing in AirOps with our LLM is actually talking with a chat assistant. And I want to share how kind of I started working with LLMs so that you can kind of have a better idea of how you might think about using this in AirOps. So if you think about ChatGPT, you think about Claude and all these models, what they really are just chat assistants. And what we're doing with the LLM is we're using this chat format to output really good content, but we have to keep in mind that it is still in chat. So to start, I won't go to ChatGPT. I'll go to something called the Playground. The Playground just gives us a better idea. Hey, Luke. The Playground gives us a better idea of how the API is set up, the OpenAI API is set up so that you guys can actually use the format that you need to get the prompts that you need. So Luke, I'm just chatting through how I got started in prompting and the fact that we just kind of need to remember that we're actually talking to a chat assistant at the end of the day. Even though it says system, user assistant, et cetera, I want to break it down just to make it easier for you to understand that this is still a chat assistant. This is exactly like ChatGPT, but with a structured format so that we can actually use the output. So this Playground is something that OpenAI makes available, and you guys can go check out yourselves. I'm going to show you here that it basically responds the exact same way that ChatGPT would. However, we're going to end up using this in our own prompting so that we can get the outputs that we need. So if we just say hi here, it's going to say, hey, how can I assist you today, right? So it's exactly the same as ChatGPT. However, we can now kind of use this format that it's provided us with user and assistant to get us the outputs that we want. And so I'm going to end up using this to show you how to basically do some text extract techniques, but I wanted to show you here first that what we're using in AirOps and what we're using all the time is still just a chat model. So here, what we're going to do is you can basically tell it the system. And for those of you who don't know, the system is kind of where you tell it it's both its persona, its tasks, and I would say kind of like those hard requirements that it must do. And today what we're going to be doing is we're just going to do a simple text extract technique where we're going to take, to get the slug from it. So sorry, Vinci, we're taking your LinkedIn URL today again. However, we're just going to end up passing the URL and we're going to ask it to give us the actual tag here, which if we take a look at Vinci's name, it would be Vinci Krishna. And the reason why we want to do some of these techniques is because you might want to pull out tags or specific parts of text so that you can pass it into downstream APIs. So we're going to tell it you are a LinkedIn URL extractor, text extractor. Given a LinkedIn URL, your task is to extract the user, I guess we could say user ID. So again, this is going to now show it like its task and what it's supposed to do. And just for kicks again, I'm going to show you that it is a chat model, but now it's going to have some context about who it is. And we're going to use this to our advantage now to perform our tasks. And also we want to use this to get the expected output every single time. Let's just say hi. There we go. So now, it's going to say, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. If you have a URL, please give it to me and I'd be happy to assist you. So you can see that we now have context. It now knows what it's supposed to do. However, what we're going to do now is we're going to apply something called user assistant pairs. So we know that it's a chat format. However, we want it now to output in a very structured format. We don't want it to actually chat with us, right? So how do we get this chat model to give us the exact same output that we want every single time without chatting with us? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to just provide the format that we want here, and we're going to give it the expected output. So this one is called, we call it user assistant pairs. And you might also hear it called, one or K-shot prompting, where basically what we're going to do is we're going to inform the chat model what its response should be, so that every time it provides, every time we provide it an input, it's going to give us the exact same output. So instead of chatting with us, we want it to just give us expected output. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to say LinkedIn profile. This is the LinkedIn profile. Or we could just say, please extract the user ID from this LinkedIn profile. And what we want to do is we want to inform the model what the expected output should be. So in this case, the user ID would be Vency right here. And so what we're doing here now is we're basically providing the expected response so that when we ask it for another user ID, it already knows, because it's responded before, what it should respond with this time. Okay. So this time we are going to actually pass, I'll use my LinkedIn profile this time. And keep in mind that it is still a chat format. So you don't have to think of it kind of as like a mechanical, input output. You can also think of it as like a chat. So sometimes I will say, now, please extract another user ID. Why do I say it in this way? Just because it helps to understand, okay, you've done it once, now I want you to do it again. From this LinkedIn profile. Oops. So I'm going to pass now my own, and let's see if it can give us the right output. There we go. So now it gives us the exact expected output that we want because we provided the example beforehand. So this is called, user assistant pairs, or 1-2 K-shot prompting, where we basically give it the example that it needs to respond with so that it gives us the expected output. I will caveat that these tasks are really good for GPT 3.5, so we can check out here if it will, also perform the same way. It does, this is a great task for like the lower class of models. I will also say the temperature we would want to put to 0 basically, because we want the exact same output every time. And the reason why I'm showing this here is because in AirOps, what we do is we're doing the exact same thing with this chat model, but we're basically leveraging it in the context of workflows. So I'm going to now put this here, where we're going to do this in AirOps now, and then we can leverage the output in downstream with like our LinkedIn step, for example. So we're just going to pass this here, and I just want to show you guys that what we're doing in OpenAI in their playground is exactly replicatable in AirOps, and sometimes you can use this to just practice and see how a chat model would naturally respond, and then how we would want to use this in AirOps. So we're just going to pass this here, and what you'll see is we're going to get the exact same result. However, we can now use this in combination with inputs and dynamic inputs, so that you can build really powerful apps. And so instead of hard coding something here, for example, like my own profile, what I would do is I would pass in an input, which I'm going to add here shortly. So here you choose the model. And again, we're going to turn the temperature down. And we're just going to give us an input here. So LinkedIn URL. And we're going to pass the LinkedIn URL here. so that each time the user passes in the information, it's going to just extract exactly what we need. Now, this is like the most simplest of use cases because I just want to show you an example of how you can start to use user assistant pairs. So if we execute this, it gives us exactly what we want. And, we can always use this downstream in future workflows. But this is kind of like the first, most basic concept, which is user assistant pairs. Anyone have any questions on how to use user assistant pairs and, kind of what we're doing here, which is basically exploiting the fact that, when we provide examples, we can get very consistent output. The last thing I will show here is that you can also use the instruct model here, which is another class of model that is really good for these kind of low-level tasks. And instead of providing user assistant pairs, this is not a chat model like, ChatGPT or the other models that we have. Turbo Instruct, in fact, is an input-output type of model. So what we're going to do for Turbo Instruct is equivalent to what we just did with the chat model, but instead of having this user and assistant chat conversation, we're just going to say input and output. So for context, again, we are extracting a user ID from a LinkedIn profile. And instead of using the chat model, we're just going to use the instruct model, which would take like an input and we would provide the output. And so the output here would be Vensi. And what we're going to do instead to provide the next input, so now it knows exactly what it should do, which is output Vensi Krishna. We're going to now input the LinkedIn URL. And here we just leave this output here blank, because what this is essentially going to do is, quote unquote, fill in the blank. So once we leave output here, our cursor is hovered right here. It understands what I'm supposed to do is basically fill in the blank, copy the pattern that I was given. And so the instruct model is very good at just, following these instructions in and out. So we're going to test again. Let's see. There we go. So with my input, it understands that that's what the output should be. So basically, an easy alternative to Turbo and the chat model is the instruct model, which is a very efficient way, both faster than Turbo, and it's one of the best ways to do these very simple tasks. Any questions on kind of the difference between Turbo and the chat models versus this specific instruct model and how you would use them? Cool. So just to wrap up one more time, we are basically using a chat model right here. The user and the assistant is the response from the AI. The user is the human talking. So you can think about the fact that this is equivalent to ChatGPT, but actually instead of being a chat format, what we want to do is take advantage of the fact that we can actually provide the expected output to the AI so that it understands exactly what it should output to us. But this is still a chat model. And so we are basically chatting. However, we are kind of taking advantage of the fact that we can provide the outputs. Cool. So if there are no questions about user assistant pairs, I would love to share a couple more techniques. I'm going to share next chain of thought prompting. And then lastly, I'm going to go through like this generate with AI feature. So if you guys don't have any questions about user assistant pairs, we can always come back as well. But I'm going to move to chain of thought. All right, so let's talk about chain of thought prompting. The best output that you're going to get from an LLM model is going to be one, either you providing the definition of what you want, or two, asking it for the definition of what it believes. So you're always going to get really great output once your task or the output is really well defined. Otherwise, it's going to give you its best guess of what something should be. So for example, let's just take, a blog title. This is a very basic example. I'm just going to put this LM step right here. Yep, we can definitely send out the recording. So let's just take the very basic example of chain of thought prompting using a blog title. So if we just ask it, can you give me a blog title about prompt engineering? Where is it going to come up with this information? And how does it come up with, like the best type of information to provide you? Those are all great questions. What it will do is probably just use its own definition of what a blog title should be, along with, along with any other information you provide. However, it's going to do its best guess, right? So you are an expert at writing blog titles. So this is like the most basic form of prompting, where you just kind of tell it to do like based on like its own knowledge. Please give me a blog title that will rank for the keyword, let's just say prompt engineering. And let's just see what it comes up with, because this is going to be based off of its own knowledge. And if you have any idea of what GPT sounds like, you will pretty much understand that it's going to say things like mastering and essential. It has its own definition of what blog means. It has its own definition of what blog title should be. So if you ever see the words master and essential, it's probably coming from GPT. And this is just like its own best guess, because this is what it understands blogs and blog titles to be, right? One way to make this better is by first asking it, what makes a good blog title? And so we're now going to, instead of just saying, okay, you're great at doing this, please do this, we're going to ask it first. And again, this is called chain of thought prompting, but we're going to ask it, what are the techniques or what makes a blog title rank in Google? So you are an SEO expert. I want my blog title to rank for the keyword prompt engineering. Please help me come up with the top principles for my title to rank. And so now we're in the process of having GPT ideate, which will help it, analyze its own method of creating a title, for example. So we're going to see what it comes up with. Then we're going to actually provide additional information here, which will enhance the output. So here it actually is now thinking through what makes a good blog title. So it's, it's keeping in mind the primary keyword, the length, the clarity, et cetera, best, guide, avoid keyword stuffing. So if you can tell now, since we just basically asked it, what it thinks, it's already come up with like a better example of what a title would be. Prompt engineering, a comprehensive guide, right? That was a lot better than what we just had, which was very GPT-like, mastering, prompt engineering. And so just by asking it, what it thinks about, like, how to make good quality output, we can then use this to create the good quality output. So typically what I will do is we'll take its output and we're just going to copy it into the assistant, because again, like I mentioned earlier, we are still in the context of a chat framework. So we're basically chatting with GPT. We're saying, okay, I want my blog title to rank. What would help do that? And now I'm going to provide this context so it understands, here's what I would do. And so once we ask, Now, can you provide a blog title for me? It has this context already that it's provided of what is a good blog title. So now we can say, based on your analysis or based on your key points, let's just say top strategies, because that's what it says over here. Based on your top strategies, please give me a blog title that will rank for, say, a unique blog title that will rank for prompt engineering. Okay, let's see what it comes up with. It still gave us mastering because I think that's probably just part of its language. There are ways that we can kind of get rid of very common GPT-like words and phrases. However, it's going to do a better job because it's, well, I guess like it says in 2023, however, we would want it to say, okay, the year is 2024 now, so that we get kind of like the output that we want. The other thing is we can actually provide additional information to make this better. For example, we can provide in a Google search of the keyword. So sometimes in our workflows, what we'll do is we'll do a Google search on prompt engineering, and then we'll pass it to the LLM and say, here are the top ranked results. Now, based on these top strategies, as well as taking a look at what's already ranked, please help give me a unique blog title that will also rank. So this is just another technique that we use called chain of thought prompting. We ask it for kind of, its own best strategies on how to write some output. Or what you can actually also do is you can provide your own strategies here into the assistant, kind of helping it guide its quote unquote thinking. And so using your own strategies, you can basically come up with something that you want in your output. So that's kind of how we use chain of thought prompting. You're almost always going to get a lot better output once you ask it to kind of think through what makes for good output, and then also informing it, informing through this assistant what that expected output should be. So any questions on how we use this and how you might use this in your own workflows? If not, we are basically going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the generate with AI feature, which we have right here. This is an awesome
from Luke, Cindy.
Oh, okay. Once you get the title strategy, would you just not break that up into a formatting instruction inside of the system? I will say that when I think about the system, I think about more of like literal things that it should or should not do, and kind of very specific formatting instructions. So I would include anything where I say, okay, do not include any, like, I would say, like, do not include the words master. And sometimes it does, listen, sometimes it doesn't. We have to do our best here. But you might also say something like, don't begin or end with quotes, or like this, return the title only. Like, I tend to give in the system very hard instructions. However, when it comes to more of like the reason or the strategies, or I guess like title length here, for example, it may or may not actually understand the actual length in the system. It has a hard time understanding numbers and getting those characters right. However, what I would do here is instead, I would basically turn some of these top strategies into the points that I think are the most important, right? If that makes sense. And remove anything that I don't find useful. And for example, 2023, right? I would change this to 2024. And all of these are more just strategies versus kind of like hard requirements, apart from apart from that length here. So I tend to keep this in the assistant just because I tried giving it to take 2 seconds before responding as if it's thinking. Yeah. Let me follow up with you, Manji, one moment, just finishing up this thought with Luke. So that was more what I was saying, break the key requirements into the system. Yes. The primary keyword should be in the title, be unique in the title. Yep. Those are all things you can definitely put in the system. The reason why I put it in the assistant is because the system is, again, I think more literal, if that makes sense. Whereas the assistant gives it that thought, that I don't know, thinking process, I guess. And so it has the ability to reason through uniqueness and whatnot. And if you define that even better in the assistant here, you know, define like what unique actually means. Like I think it's going to respond better just because it has more context. What we're lacking here, which I would provide and I can show another time, is providing like that Google search, for example, showing what's already ranking on Google and having it think off of the Google search. That would be like a great way to do this. But yeah, so I like to keep it in the assistant unless it's very literal, just because it can reason through this actually and give that good output. On responding as if it's thinking in the chatbot use case. So this is a bit different than the chatbot use case. If you're kind of imagining that you just want it to pause and like pretend that it's thinking, that's like one question. And I think I've been able to do this. I would have to go back and look at the prompt, but it is possible to get the chatbot to pause for a little bit before responding. However, in the chatbot, if you're trying to also get it to create unique output, what I would do is either you can put it in that user and assistant section, like, you know, I guess I can go over to the chatbot and show you really quickly. But what you would do if you were an agent is basically show that right here. You could provide example interactions again to kind of inform its quote unquote thinking, or you could even just chat with it so that it has more context about what you're asking. But I will say if the question is specifically to get it to pause, I think there is a way to do that, but it just requires very explicit directions. I can go back and follow up with you there. Yeah, to pause, I think I'd have to go back and check a specific prompt. I think I've had someone else ask about this too to make it feel more natural. And what you would want to do though is you would want to put it in the system and the user. So you would want to say something like, please either pause for 2 seconds, pause for 3 seconds before responding, and you would also put it in the user before responding to me. And again, we're saying this as if we're the user and the assistant is talking to us. So before responding to me, pause for 2 seconds, right? So like something like this where you would put it both in the user and the system. There is a way to do this, but it's kind of just like a little trick.
Got it. I think that's very helpful because I thought that in the user and the assistant conversation, we had to put like exact conversation and not the instructions to do it.
So here's what, what we're actually doing is, again, like this is kind of what I prefaced with at the very beginning, but what we're doing with both this chat assistant here and the LLM prompt is we're basically kind of, we're I don't want to say tricking, but kind of tricking it into doing what we want by pre-populating the user or the assistant with the information that we want. So for example, if we go back to here with this format, this is not actually like, if we just asked it, without providing this input, it might provide a bunch of, chat response to it, right? Like, sure, I'll do that for you. Here's the user ID, right? But we're providing just the output so that we get the expected response. Similarly, what we're doing, in the chat bot too, is when we say, please pause for 2 seconds here, before responding to me each time. We're just kind of pre-prompting it so that when your user comes in here, what's going to happen is it's already going to show this message that says, before responding to me, pause for 2 seconds. And then your user will come in and test it. This message is already sent to the chat assistant. And so it's like the first message that it sees. And so that's kind of what we're doing. We're basically taking the format of this user and assistant to get the results that we need for our end user, if that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yep. Yeah. So here, I mean, this is just a really good example. We can even test this out. What I would recommend is if you have any very specific instructions in the chatbot, you can always put them in the user, and that way it's pre-populated with information like, please call me by my name, and you could provide the name there. Those are all ways that you could basically provide information beforehand so that the chatbot already knows what to do. Any other questions on, I guess, what we were talking about earlier, which is chain of thought? If not, I can go to the generate with AI. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the generate with AI feature here, which is honestly a great feature for folks to get started with if you have never ever prompted before. Obviously, it's going to give you a good starting point. So we have the different task types here, and depending on the type of task, it's going to provide recommended model as well as the prompt to go with it. So we have content creation, we have question and answer, entity extraction, text extraction, which is kind of what we did, and then classification. So let me just take a quick look here, see what it's recommended to us. This is really interesting. I'm not sure if this would be exactly like prompts that we would use, but what we're going to do is I'm going to show you just, with the same LinkedIn URL use case, how we could extract that simply by asking the LLM. There are a lot of different output types, which I think is a great feature because, if you need to output in JSON, for example, or HTML, you can get that expected output really easily. What we're going to do is just plain text, but we're going to say extract the user ID from a LinkedIn URL. And we're going to see if it's able to give us something that's useful. The hard part here is that the best way to do user and assistant pairs is to provide real life examples. It looked like I did a pretty good job here. This is exactly what I did earlier, so I'm actually quite impressed. So please extract the user ID from this LinkedIn profile. This is like exactly what I wrote. This is very eerie. But yeah, I wonder if it's good, it's taking information from my previous prompt. But yeah, so this is a great way for you to get started with the generate with AI feature if you have no idea, and also, or if you're just kind of lazy and you don't want to write the entire user assistant example out. Let's see if we can do something else. Any ideas on what I should kind of ask it to extract or to generate? We could do sentiment analysis, or I mean, no ideas? All right, so let's go ahead and let's try something else. Let's try classification. So we could just say classify a product review into let's just see if it can come up with categories into categories. This is really powerful. So let's let it keep going. Obviously, this is just a baseline of what you can do, but I think it's a great starting point. It also gives you the model, so we're going to use 3.5 for a lot of these classification examples. It gives you like a review already, and then also kind of a way to format the output. Obviously, you can change this according to what you need. And it understands, okay, like I need to basically classify another product review. This you're probably going to have to change to your own input. However, it gives you kind of like the essential structure of what we did with a user assistant pair. So I would highly recommend this, you know, if you're a first time prompter, definitely a great way to get started. Any questions on how to use this generate with AI? It was so simple. I feel like, you know, you could just definitely test it out yourself to kind of see how it works. If we don't have any other questions, I really wanted to make this time available for you all to ask questions. It doesn't have to be about prompting. It can be, you know, anything that you have with your workflows, any questions that you have in general, happy to field them. And yeah, just let you guys, you know, take it away if you have any questions. If not, feel free to hop out. I'll be sticking around though, so. Thanks, Luke. Yep, we can definitely send out the recording. Thanks, Brent.
Cindy, do you guys have like some material on like what goes into the system versus the user assistant element? I think that framework would be very helpful to use those ones, because I think some of the tips you shared was very helpful. So I wonder if there's like a write-up or something that we can.
Yep. We don't have anything written out in text or formal guidance just yet. I do have some tips based on, what I've experienced and kind of what I've realized. I will say I tend to put less in the system just because the more you put, the more it tends to have like very, I guess it doesn't interpret it as naturally as it might in the user, if that makes sense. So system for me feels much more of like a very hard coded type of instruction, like, you know, rules and tasks and expected format. But anything that requires interpretation, I think is better in the user.
I see. And behind the scenes, how is that interacting with OpenAI, let's say Turbo 4? Like, is it like an assistance API on the user
So
side versus other ones?
everything that we're doing is with their, their API directly, but it's not the assistance API. It's just their chat API. And so all of their chat format has the assistant, the user, or sorry, the system, the user, and the assistant. So it's exactly the same as, OpenAI, but this is kind of just based off of experience working with their API. Yeah.
Got it. And have you seen differences in that and the assistance API? Like, hey, when to use that? Or are you guys planning to use that assistance API in certain use cases more than the others?
We haven't yet explored the assistance API thoroughly in terms of like, I guess, implementation. And so I wouldn't be able to speak to what that looks like. My guess is that it's probably very similar to chat. However, like kind of the information that you can pass to it is more powerful, but at the same time, maybe not as customizable. So we have stuck to, passing our information through vector stores, through a memory store here, which you would just pass to the chat assistant.
Got it.
Whereas I think in the assistants, it's kind of like a part of the file, quote unquote, and you don't necessarily know how that's being interacted with, right? So I think right now the chat feels a little bit more more customizable.
Got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is great.
Yep. Great to have you. Thanks. Have a good one. All right, y'all. I think it's just us.
That was great. That was like super clear.
Yeah, I hope everyone learned something. Cool. Yeah, that
Yeah.
went longer than I thought, but also glad that